Welcome back. We are looking forward to continue. Where we left off last week, if you recall, it was the end of 210 in the original text. V'chein kol nitzutz proti me'ashchino shebenefesh kol echad miYisrael. And so to every particular specific spark from the Shechina, which is in the soul of every single Yid. What is this v'chein? And so too. Again, that's where we left off last week. So pretty much it's a click away. You can see it in last week's class, which is on the screen. If you wherever you're watching this, if you go back to the original website, it's clearly there on the left side of the site, which is, I believe, that was the third class on this epistle, Igeres HaKodesh, and you can see what we were talking about before, and to the how today's continuation, B'chein, and so to what? So to what was he talking about before? That he says that in an often klali, in a general manner, and then he says V'chein kol nitzutz prati, in a specific manner. So basically, like I said, we try to make a real attempt that the not to spend much time on recapping of the previous class, even though we always feel that it's kind of an obligation too, in order to it's important to do so, put it this way, in order to be able to come in with it to the information of the present class. But we shouldn't take much time because really it's a click away. As we mentioned time and again, you should care for the host of class, but the original website, there's the added advantage on the original website. Besides, as we mentioned, for the newcomers, it's the way it's built. It was built is in a way that you could follow the class easily because the way it's set up, the text is on a separate scroll bar, but namely that all the previous classes are lined up on the left side of the site, that one could tap in, for example, the last week's class, to understand what we learned and to see how this is a following, this v'chein, and so too, and similarly to what? You just look at the previous class, understand the information, what we have learned, in the enormous insights which the Alter Rebbe shares with us in this very chapter, like in every chapter in Tanya, in every one of the Igeres HaKodesh. We mentioned we are presently learning the fourth segment of Tanya. We were zeicha, we merited to learn and conclude the first, which is L'kuti Amorim, and then Sharich V'Emunah and Igeres HaTshuva, and now Igeres HaKodesh. It's a bit set up differently. We spoke about in the past. This is separate epistles, separate letters. It's not like one segment like the previous former three, the first three, that it's these are chapters of basically one segment, which means one message when it comes through a Sharich V'Emunah, even more Igeres HaTshuva. It's the presentation of the Alter Rebbe explaining the whole message and the whole subject of tshuva. Of course, with the Alter Rebbe's inimitable way of presenting any idea of Torah, and the way he so uniquely explains to us the whole chapter of tshuva, which is one of the most important, essential, and crucial chapters in our life, the lifetime of a Yid. Is tamid b'tshuva, that a Yid stands with a tshuva on a constant basis. The Alter Rebbe explains it in a number of other places. What does it mean, constant basis? It doesn't mean that someone chas v'shalom is constantly sinning. That he's kol yoma b'tshuva. There's so much depth to that statement. And in general, as we understand that tshuva is one of the most crucial, essential mitzvahs that we have in the Torah, and by definition of what it is, that is the greatest gift for that matter. Hashem gives the Yid that he's able to do tshuva. So we do understand and appreciate it's a very important subject as we progress with our avodas Hashem, alei adamis, in this world, fulfilling our mandate to establish for our Kodesh Baruch Hu this very world as his home, as his abode, through our learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. So, and we could again appreciate why tshuva is so crucial and so important. And again, this is a gift Hashem gives us, that even chas v'sholom we deviate from the mandate which was given to us, we have the ability to hop on. So we do understand that this is something not just another mitzvah, even though you can really not say just another mitzvah. Every mitzvah is part of the mitzvah sides, mitzvahs of the infinite HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite God, the infinite Almighty. But tshuva is definitely unique. So, for example, the Alter Rebbe has a whole segment of tshuva. These are 12 chapters, and they're in sequential setup, one chapter after the other, and because it's a whole subject, Alter Rebbe is explaining. So to Sharichid V'Emunah, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, these are 12 chapters. Again, they come one as a follow-up after the other, and then you have the entire message. But so too Likutei Amarim, for that matter, even though it's 53 chapters, and there are different sections within these 53 chapters, which you can clearly say explains and underscores this idea and other ideas, which the Alter Rebbe takes a few chapters to explain, and so on and so forth. But definitely, in the end of the day, it's Likutei Amarim, and the more you learn Likutei Amarim, you see the clear connection and sequence from one chapter to the other, and from the very beginning of the Tanya till the very last perek of the Tanya, you see that this is overall one message, which we mentioned many times, the perfect manual to Avodas Hashem, the very perfect manual to Avodas Hashem. If someone wants to be honest and describe the Tanya, of course, there's so many descriptions. If you can describe something so great from written by someone so great, but in brief, definitely it's something which is a justifiable description. As an example, Geras HaKodesh is set up differently. It's letters, presentations of the Alter Rebbe, written at different times, addressing different issues, different matters, encouraging different matters to different communities, or even though in the end of the day it's a letter written by the Alter Rebbe, which becomes a klal type of letter, means say it's pertinent to every single yid, and it's in the end of the day it's not limited to a particular place, time. It's the Alter Rebbe's presentation, which is meant to teach every single yid in every generation for perpetuity the messages which the Alter Rebbe conveys in every one of these epistles. But again, they're set up different. That's why they call Geras HaKodesh and Daled. In other words, there's no direct correlation between Daled and Hey. For that matter, we mentioned even the time the Alter Rebbe, it's not in sequence. The Alter Rebbe, when he wrote the letters, certain letters, which are the way it's set up, for the reasons the way where they were set up, of course there was a reason, but nonetheless there's certain letters which came later, which were written earlier, and so vice versa. We did mention this in the past as well. So we were holding this important message. The original website would be the tanyaonline.com, tanyaonline.com, so which we learned last week, which again, it's on the site presently, which we learned about this idea of Hashem. Hashem gives the ability that basically the reconciliation of the two verses. In one, it says, you are meant to circumcise the blockage of your heart. And then another pasuk, it says, that Hashem will circumcise your heart, which eventually would lead la'avas Hashem l'kecha. You can have a overt, passionate love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the contradiction, you're doing it, Hashem's doing it in general. What is the idea of maltam? Why would Eibishter, when Hashem wants to tell us about the blockage of our heart that we ought to remove, of course we have to remove it in order to be able to express that innate, inherent connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that these blockages, we ourselves pretty much placed on that, on the purity, on the divine energy which exist inherently in the heart of every single yid, in their inherent and innate connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we have to remove it. Why would Torah use the terminology of maltam, to circumcise, which is a very unique lashon? Torah would say this to lahasir, and again, or anything similar, remove it, place the blockage, and it's causing, so to say, that sense of kind of dormant in the relationship with you and your Creator. Remove the blockage, and then everything will flow, and it'll be lucid and transparent, and it'll all work. You would feel that sensational connection. Sensationally, you'll feel that connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with your Creator. You'll serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a very close and in a very intimate manner, because you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are essentially one. You have a chelik l'kamim mal mamash. You have a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within you. So why would Torah use the terminology of umaltim, to circumcise? So we explained it last week, that it's with precision Hashem uses that term, and that itself becomes the reconciliation between the two verses. One says you to circumcise your heart, and then the other, and Hashem will do it for you. Yes, in Milah and circumcision there is the thicker layer and then the very thinner layer. Mol v'lei porikilu mol. We mentioned the halacha that the Rebbe writes brings this halacha that even though one would think that in the mitzvah Milah you got rid of the important part, you got rid of the real cover, you're done with the mitzvah and you're all good to go. No, you're not good to go, because there's still a thin layer, and the halacha is you have to get rid of the thin layer as well. And so too, in which this becomes the basis why Hashem chooses this terminology. Umaltem, because Hashem is telling us, yes, you have to take away the thick blockage. And this we all know how to do it. We knew how to put it on. We were meant to know how to take it off. And but nonetheless, there still remains a thin layer, which doesn't allow that, the translucency, if you will, between you and your Creator. We gave a few examples last week, and you need that to come off as well. And that's where Hashem kicks in. He says, you take off the thicker layer. And as we explained again, we were more specific last week, taking off the thicker layer, again, it's not something we have to delve in a lot, because we all pretty much aware and know what layers we're talking about, how we placed, in other words, how did this thick layer come on to that, the purity, the unadulterated purity, and godliness, which exist inherently within the heart of every single yid. Throughout, in the end of the day, it's being overly indulgent in the physical, and the delights and the pleasures of Elam Haza. And again, we spoke about this last week. That doesn't mean that person has to run away from the material. Not at all. But from that to be overly indulgent, those are very big steps which were taken deliberately. And therefore, we have to remove it. And we know exactly what to do. Comes Hashem and says, when you'll remove that, you'll do the milah, I'll do the priya. Because you need to do the priya. As if you didn't circumcise yourself. And again, as though we explained this last week, again, with a few examples, that the thin layer could make all the difference. But that Hashem says, I will do that. You'll do the milo, maltem, I will take away that final layer in order to reveal that la'avas Hashem, like the pasuk says, Hashem with all your heart and all your soul. It's all working at that time. That transparent fervor is passionate love. HaKadosh Baruch Hu just kicks in, because that's in essence, that's the default of every single yid. So Hashem says that, and that is why that is pretty much when Hashem is going to do that. So Dr. Rebbe says that this is really the times of Yimei Mashiach. That's when this is going to unfold. On a very general manner, meaning to say that Hashem is going to do this as a overall, so to say, Yimei Mashiach presentation, which is going to affect everybody. That's what Yimei Mashiach is. No Jew will be left behind. Everyone will experience this connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this la'avas Hashem, because Hashem amol Hashem l'kechas l'bavcha, and this is b'tzura klalit. In other words, in a general manner, meaning to say that it's going to be like Mashiach's coming is to the entire world, primarily to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish nation, and by extension to the entire world. No one will be left behind. Nothing of the Elam Haza, of this very physical world, which will not feel and sense the reign of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kol haaretz means without an exception. So you have that umol Hashem lekecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha la'avas Hashem lekecha. Rather, Hashem is going to do that final priya, to take over the final level, the final layer. That's going to be to the entire world. That is what Mashiach is really all about. The connection, the uninterrupted connection of Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's going to be uninterrupted because it shouldn't ever be interrupted, because this is who we are as a Yid. We're inherently connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The problem is that we went into Galus, and a lot of us a big part of our school going to Galus by our choice. Galulu edim shchinima. A person does, the famous Alter Rebbe has this in chapter 17. You can look at 17, Lukuti Amorim, it's a click away. When a person does a lot of Edomic stuff, which is really establishes an enormous blockage, and for that matter, it interferes in the regular service of a Yid to his Creator. You can see in that chapter, very strong words there, actually. You have this message very clear in Igeres HaTshuva, the central chapters, Hey, Vav, Zayin. It's not simple. It's not simple at all, because the blockage can be very thick and it really interferes. And therefore we're meant, it's really come upon us to take it away. And so too the Alter Rebbe brings, we got a little Bavel. We got involved in Bavel stuff. So Shechina Imam, we pulled the Shechina in, and it's a mess. Again, we spoke about this last week in those chapters. In Avigeres HaTshuva, as an example, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Vav, namely Vav and Zayin, 6 and 7, it's a click away. Avigeres HaTshuva, 6 and 7. Yud Zayin 17 in Lukuti Amorim, as an example. When Mashiach will come, everything will be, we would do our service, and we've been doing it for so many years, and unfortunately, there was a kind of even assistance to us to do our part. We had quite severe reminders of who we are and to stay focused on our mandate, Alei Adamis. In other words, in this world, what we're meant to do. Unfortunately, those reminders were not pleasant reminders, but nonetheless, it got us going, and we're pretty much at it. Nonetheless, Mobile Parak Ilemos, Hashem takes away the final layer. This is really akin to Mashiach. This is what Mashiach is all about, because it opens up that Nukudas Pnimis Halev, which is higher than Das, like the Rebbe wrote in the previous page, in the first chapter we get in the previous classes, first and second class. There's the way that a Yid is able to establish a love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu based on his knowledge, his Chochmah Bina Das, wisdom, understanding, namely that knowledge, that Das, like it's explained, what the function of Das, the important function of Das, to really develop a heart connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can see it in the end of the third chapter, Lukuti Amorim, the end of the third chapter, Lukuti Amorim, the first segment, also a click away. Also Membez, the 42nd chapter of Lukuti Amorim, the connection to Das in developing a heart, an emotional connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But nonetheless, Alter Rebbe said that's part of the Chitzainis Halev, the external part of the heart, which is again a strong statement when a person has that passion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because he established such a structured, composed and structured appreciation of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his Chochmah, in his Bin, in his Das, meditation and pondering, and he made it, and his heart is on fire. Out there, it's still Chitzainis Halev. Again, we spoke about this. We shouldn't take time. Again, it's the first or second class on this very epistle, because out there there's something deeper. There's no Kadali, but higher than Das. It's just who we are. The Yid has his part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Yid has a nitzitz aliki, has a godly spark, because he's a chelik of kamim al mam. She's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it runs so much deeper than a love which is produced by a structured and focused appreciation on the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is again established through my Yizbeinus, my pondering, my meditation. Even though in the Shema Yisrael also, it lies therein also that inherent connection of Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Yid could shift or establish that Hashem Echad, to reveal that Kadaliba, even that in that Hashem Echad, because the depth of one's heart is higher and deeper, again, as explained. I don't want to say this just in a cryptic manner, in other words, that it should be not be adequately understood, therefore it's really a click away, the first two classes, of the difference of Chitzainis Halev, a love which is produced through a structured comprehension of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as opposed to the innate love he is to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Pnimis Halev, that's Kadali, that's higher than Das. And Al Terebe continue next. This is why Mr. Mashiach, and this is why it's so keen to Yemais Mashiach, or this is what really Yemais Mashiach is all about. Because what does it say about Yemais Mashiach? Mashiach, but behesach hadas. And we explained this. What means you don't stop thinking about Mashiach. The Talmud is telling us, the Chazal, our sages of lesson memory, are telling us that this is what Mashiach is. It's hesach hadas, beyond das. Because when Mashiach is going to come, that innate, inherent connection of the Yiddu, that Kodesh Baruch Hu, will be manifest and will be default and will never interrupt, because Hashem is going to take away that final layer. And of course, when you take away the final layer, the emes of the Yid, his innate and inherent connection, will resurface instantaneously. La'avas, and that would establish la'avas Hashem lekecha, the love of Kodesh Baruch Hu with all his heart, with all his whole b'ma'umkadeliba, from the depth of his heart, beyond the das, beyond the emotional connection, relation with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, the love of the Kodesh Baruch Hu, which comes based on the Chachma, Bina, and Das. That's Chitzeni Saleh. Mashiach will come, it will be the Unkadaliba. So therefore, it's Alter Rebbe writes so beautifully, this is Pshat, what it says. That Mashiach, but Behesach Hadas, Hadas means this is what Mashiach is all about. Revealing the innate and inherent relationship of the Yid with Kodesh Baruch Hu. And therefore it's Ma'umka Deliba, from the depth of the person's heart. It's Pnimi Salev, the core of the Yid's heart, as opposed to Chitzeni Salev. Today writes, today we begin. V'chein kol nitzas v'chein. V'chein means to say, even though it's going to be in this overarching manner, general manner, to all of Am Yisrael, when Mashiach will come. But nonetheless, prior to Mashiach's coming, which again, as we stand now, entering more and more into the thick and thin of Yemais Mashiach, but nonetheless, till it comes in its full package, and the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Das is Hashem, the entire land we fill with the knowledge of God. The entire world, the entire Oretz will appreciate the Malchus, the reign of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Till that happens in a complete manner, can a Yid tap into that experience of a Mol Hashem Elokecha Shalevavcha, that connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ma'umka Deliba, even after he took away the thicker layer, the crassness, the grossness which he placed, which established the layer, in other words, in crass and gross, indulgent in matters of Elam Haza, which created this layer, and he took it away. He did take away this layer. But we know Movale Parakilimo, because that's that thin layer which, in the end of the day, divides the Yid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, divides in a way that he cannot overtly demonstrate and experience that connection. And for that, he needs Hashem to do that. And Hashem says he's going to do that, but that's a pasuk associated with the times, the Messianic times, the times of Mashiach. So what, in Gullus we're stuck, we can never ever connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from this in manner of umkadalib, the depth of our heart, through our pnimi salev. We can't do that because we didn't merit the time of Mal Hashem lekechas lebavcha v'eslevav zarecha. Mal Hashem lekecha es lebavcha. I believe it says v'eslevav zarecha. It says chulu, etc. La'avas Hashem lekecha, to have that love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's beyond passion. It's deeper than having that passion of love. This is the most truest connection a Yid could establish with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to reveal that innate and inherent love. So till that time of Mashiach's coming, when Hashem, so to say, kicks in and says, I'm going to do the priya, if you will, I'm going to take away the final layer, and as such, the entire Am Yisrael will have Avas Hashem Lekecha with all your heart, with all your soul. And I wonder if I want to experience it now. I can't, because I wasn't Zeicha yet. We didn't have a complete manifestation of Yemaisa Mashiach. We didn't have a complete, all-encompassing manifestation of Yemaisa Mashiach. So Alter Rebbe says, no. You could tap into that. And this is one of the greatest gifts Hashem gave Am Yisrael. He spoke about the gift of tshuva, but yes, you could definitely put into the package as either one of the greatest gifts Hashem gave Am Yisrael is the gift of davening, the gift of tefillah. That if you really exercise a good, healthy davening, you're being taken to a place, you arise to a place that you on your own can't even connect the dots. How you got there and how you entered into that experience. But in the end of the day, you know that if you do exercise a healthy davening, and of course healthy davening, one has to understand what davening is all about. Prepare himself for davening. And it's not a matter of, sometimes a person gets carried away with davening, that it goes beyond the hour, which is even designated initially. But even when somebody, davens even with the timing of the minyan, but he can really get involved in this experience, and again with a proper preparation, an organized mind, an organized heart, understanding what it's all about, what davening is all about, one could get lost in with true connection, intimacy with his Creator, in a way that he feels that oneness. And it doesn't mean that the whole 45 minutes or hour, which one designates for davening, of course referring to Shachris, because Mincha and Ma'ariv, as it says in so many Svarim, it's kind of re-experiencing the experience that a person experienced in the morning. Shachris is the main tefillah, even though Mincha has its own virtue, and Mincha is called on its own, that it's a central and a vital prayer, even vis-a-vis Shachris, the morning prayer. Ma'ariv also has its accolade even over Mincha and Shachris, explained in so many Svarim. But Shachris is the central davening of the day, as we know, and therefore we spend much more time, and it's the beginning of the day when he is much more conducive to connect it with his Creator and connect deeply with his Creator. There's a number of places. Not to go into the now, of course, why we talk about Lavam, which was in Arami, but the way Chassidus and Kabbalah Chassidus explains it, there's something very pure, very lavnunis, very posh, very white, means to say it's not tainted by the colors of the experiences of the person in this world, and that's Babaikir early in the morning, as it says so many places in Kabbalah and in Chassidus and Sifrei Musar, the conduciveness of a Yid in his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the morning, even after the morning, not necessarily after, but even after the morning begins. In other words, the second part of the morning, there's something very, very unique about the Babaikir. We could all understand it, and it's evident. We all experience it. There's something very special and genuine in the morning. That's what Shachris was designated for. When a person understands the phenomenon of tefillah, what tefillah is all about, and he learns about Chassidus, Chassidus Chabad, to really have the godly message and the godly reality flow through his chokhmah, bina das, and his heart, and as explained in many, many svarim, the unique talent of davening, in other words, which is really attainable to every single human being. No one should ever say, no, this is me. Many bahola, I could say the words, and maybe a little shuckle, and come on time, and daven with a minyan, and so on, and do all the right things, which, yes, that's definitely the starting point. Have a siddur open, and have a little, primarily Pirush HaMilos, the meaning of the words. But when one knows that it can really run deeper, and it's meant to run deeper, and it can if the person makes a real hachana. And of course, learning Chassidus Chabad is something which is really pretty much the only way will really can someone exercise a real, true, genuine avodas hatfilah. It doesn't mean that if not, there's nothing. It's not all or nothing, but to get to the real connection and cleave and dveikos with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in intimate levels, really to be part of the oneness of it, to have the sensation of being one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one has to learn Chassidus Chabad. And to understand and to prepare himself for davening, to understand what davening is all about, and to identify with it in a way not falsely, and not just with external expressions, a scream, a yell, a shuckle. It's all, something falls into the place. Something's davening, he shuckles, says like a candle because it's on fire. So there's It's fine, it's okay, but that's not what davening is really all about. There's something really deep happening. And for that matter, it's a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a kind of microcosmic Umal Hashem Eslokecha Levavcha. And it truly is. You can see it in the chapter Yud Beis or Yud Gimel. In L'Kutei Amorim, the Alter Rebbe says that when a person starts davening, there is the Mechin, the Gadlus opens up. A window on high opens up. It's not only you're able to climb, but really to be in that close and really touching the divine. You really can't do it on your own because you're a finite created being. And of course you have a neshama, but the neshama is invested in a body. So neshama, it could aspire and pine, is meant to aspire and pine, at least in the time of davening, to try to connect and touch and feel and experience the divine. But at the end of the day, the neshama is invested in a body and has this type of confinement and that type of confinement. As we all know, davening could be a struggle on its own, and therefore Hashem says, I am going to do that type of microcosmic Umal Hashem Elokecha at the time that you start davening. That's why it's such a gift. I am starting to daven, and Hashem just rushes in and pulls open a window. Right, it's the Lashon there. It's a time is man Mechin de Gadlus. Mechin de Gadlus can be translated in a number of ways, but one of the ways that it's translated is that Hashem is coming from the other end and opening up Mechin de Gadlus Lamailo, which you see over here. Hashem is opening up that window to connect and to have that intimate connection with the Yid. So in Perik Yud Beis, L'Kutei Amorim, you can see it. It's a click away. So so it doesn't mean that the entire hour I had that dveikus. Not necessarily. Usually not. But it's a build-up. That's why davening is like called a sulam mutzav artzav v'reishim magiya shemayim. That's a ladder. Ladder has a few rungs. There's the korbanos a person starts with, and this psuki de zimra has its unique message, and it's an important rung to elevate the person, as explained many sifrei chassidus and sifrei musar. Why is it so crucial? Why is it so essential to go through that rung of Psuki de Zimra? But on the surface, of course, that's the Anshe Knesset. They'll establish that rung, so that's what we follow. But what is the meaning behind it? And it's explained so many different places. That Rabbi Rashad has in Kuntres Aveda, famously, and in others, Kuntresim apparently says, isn't the ultimate goal to get the Hashem to the Hashem Echad, Yichud Ilah, as opposed to Yichud Tata? Not to go into it now. Because we actually spoke about this in the past. You could see it in these Kuntresim of the Rebbe Rashab, which he analyzes detail by detail, and the whole package of davening in his unique, yes, inimitable way of the Rebbe Rashab. And he explains rung by rung, and he shows you, and if you follow that pattern as an example, when one says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, he could really have that connection, and that absolute connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a very deep and intimate manner. And from there on, even continue with it. V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha could be a true, genuine love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At the moment, at least when he davens. After davening, it's a different struggle again. That's the uniqueness of this perfect manual of the Alter Rebbe in L'Kutei Amorim. He writes after davening, that passionate love subsides, and you're onto another challenge. The challenge to be the frumiyid, to learn Torah, and to take your thought, speech, and action away from this which you are pulled into, which seems to be, if you were just in touch with the divine on all levels throughout davening, why the struggle after davening? You're already in love with the Hashem Echad, the extreme divine energy and divine spirit and holiness, and why are you bothered by anything else? And the answer is that subsides. And after davening is a new challenge, and therefore you have to control your action, speech, and any thought, eyes, ears, and so on, and the leisasa, and make the effort to come towards Hashem, even at that point that you're not experiencing that intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which, if you have an intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course you're driven to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, but you have a new challenge because that subsides. But again, that's L'Kutei Amorim, which tells us again, second by second, stage by stage, part by part, so to say, in our entire day, month, week, month, how we're meant to perform and how it all works. That's why Tanya L'Kutei Amorim is the perfect manual to our Avodas Hashem. But the Avodas Tefillah is definitely a bonus. It's a kind of microcosmic Mashiach experience in our day. For that matter, it's called the Shabbos, the microcosmic Shabbos of the weekday. Because Shabbos is Kulil Hashem Elikecha. If we again, back to the same idea, if we really understand what Shabbos is all about, Shabbos, we could lift ourselves up to a different area. It's not something which is particularly a holy and unique special avodah of the special yid, if it's a tzaddik or something. No, every yid could really sense that Shabbos is different. Shabbos is unique. Shabbos is a different experience. And of course, it takes investment. It matters to utilize the Shabbos the way you're meant to, and one might feel it. But as Alter Rebbe writes so many times, the Shabbos of every day is the tefillah of every day. The experience of prayer is a microcosmic Mashiach experience gifted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the time you start davening. And that's why it's such a gift. In the words of Alter Rebbe, it's the tzaddik bonus for the Beinani. It's the tzaddik experience in the Beinani's life. Now again, if you, this would be perfectly understood if you acquainted with Likutei Amarim, which is Sefer Shel Beinanim, of the, so to say, struggling yid. I say struggling, but the yid has like that kind constant challenge. But Hashem says, I'm giving you a bonus every day that you can tap into that tzaddik experience, which the tzaddik never has issues. Without the Rebbeis and Perek Chav Zayin, tzaddik has no issues. He's not driven to anything which he has to hold himself back. His eyes are not going in the direction which most of the regular people, even the Beinani, can drift away in milliseconds. Of course, millisecond decision, he has to pull it away, because Chas v'Shalom, if he gives in to where his eye is taking him, he's called a Rasha, not a Beinani, even for a millisecond. He has the koyach, the ability to overcome in action, in speech, and even in thought. As the Alter Rebbe again shows us in the presentation of Likutei Amarim, the doctrine of the Alter Rebbe, that perfect manual, which tells us, yes, you have the challenge, but you have the ability never ever to listen to that signal. The Nefesh Mahamis, even the Nefesh Mahamis in the animal soul, very potent with the Nefesh Mahamis. By the Beinani, that is. Kiyemi Volde, never goes away. By a tzaddik is a different story. That's why most of the people are not tzaddikim. Right? You could tell me somebody, or could you know somebody who doesn't have issues in his Avodas Hashem? He's not driven to anything which is the antithetical to the godly message. Of course, most of us are. We have the ability never to give into that signal, so we remain Beinanim, never a Rasha, Kol Yomov. Because the moment you give into the signal, even a millisecond, you're no more a tzaddik, you're no more a Beinani, you're according to Torah, it's a Rasha. But, and therefore we have the kaya, the ability through action, speech, and thought, to make sure that our actions, speech, and thought are 100% pure and clean. We have the ability to do so, and perfectly. The Alter Rebbe writes, by nature, mind governs over heart. That's why they've created the human being, every human being, not even necessarily the yid. This is the mechanism of the human being. This is the way he works. And we can put it to work like a machine. You're going to put it to work, or you're not going to put it to work. But once you put it to work, it's going to work perfect. Because it's a healthy machine, this is the way Hashem created us. So we can make it work, but nonetheless, it's a challenge. The Rebbe writes twice, the Lashon in Likutei Amarim, Muhammad Summa. He's in agreement that Alter Rebbe was a tzaddik. He didn't have these issues, but he was not only a tzaddik, he was a nasi, a leader, which dealt with the entire Am Yisrael in his times and for all times, and as a Neshama Chadasha, introducing this perfect manual to all of Am Yisrael. So he goes through step by step and kind of takes the Beinani, the average, by the hand, and says, come, we're going to do this together, and we're going to be successful, 100% successful. We can do it. And he writes there, to think twice in Likutei Amarim, Michal Matsumi agrees it's an intense war. But we can understand that if a person is in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and is in that deep, intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then at that point there is no war, because you're in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're not loving anything else. Remember we spoke about this last week? Love, if you're in love with one idea in one direction, you can't love something which is the antithesis of that or that person. So in the end of the day, the tefillah is a time when the yid connects with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in such a deep and intimate level. Of course, that would resemble the tzaddik's avodah, which tzaddik has no issues. He's always in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that's the bonus of prayer, as we find in Likutei Amarim. That the Eibishter gives us the tzaddik moment. And when we step up to the plate, despite we're the person's a Beinani, and despite is, again, the Kol Adam Yimshech, Lavaya Beinani, the Alter Rebbe writes famously in the 26th or 27th chapter of the 27th chapter of Likutei Amarim, the Halavaya Beinani. But nonetheless, it is the Kol Adam Yimshech. This is where we have to be driven to be the Beinani. And we step up to the plate. We try to daven. We want to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and an intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to feel that close, to have that microcosmic Mashiach experience. How does that work? So the Alter Rebbe says yes. Hashem is establishing Berumol Hashem Alekecha, which is a pasuk associated with the Yemaisa Mashiach. Again, a microcosmic Mashiach experience coming from Hashem. Hashem is pulling away that final layer in order to connect that deep, and yes, on an intimate level with Him, with Hashem. Which is the lashon. That's the lashon. Meichin the gadlus l'mayla. Hashem is pulling open a window, and that's why davening is such a gift. It's the greatest gift. And of course, as the Alter Rebbe writes, in this very chapter, for that matter, that a person who is able to tap into davening, as the Alter Rebbe writes in the second chapter of Igeres HaKodesh, which we learned to click away, Yom Midrashun Hashem. The Alter Rebbe understood the vitality of davening, because if you don't daven, a person doesn't invest in davening. Again, it's not a matter of taking more than the time, but investing in davening. Davening to be, as we mentioned before, doesn't mean the entire hour one stands with that intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a build-up, but he can reach there. And Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the person could really experience it, even in a few seconds, but that's transformative. In those few seconds, you had this Mashiach experience. In those few seconds, you were intimately connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is a game changer. Especially when a person goes on with his davening, Baruch Atah Hashem, a person can really get carried away with the Amidah, which is really the highest rung in the whole experience of prayer. It's even a step ahead of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. But the real procedure can begin earlier. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is about the achdus, that oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which captures the entire person to enter into that oneness, which is really the ideal spot, pretty much, even though it can begin earlier, like any relationship. It's not tooth and nail. It's not something which is robotic. And then from there, the person goes on, and then Shemoneh Esrei is definitely a time when a person could really get lost, but it's not measured in time. Because if a person in that hour, that 50 minutes or so, could have even a few milliseconds, how much more so a few seconds, maybe even a full minute throughout, of that deep, intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course it's a game changer. It's a wild game changer. It's from one extreme to the other, to the exclusion of a person doesn't invest in his davening. The Avodas Hashem of someone who davens, the Avodas Hashem of someone who doesn't daven, it's day and night. I say the English night because it's brought all on Sifrei Chassidus that it's night. There's nothing. It's good. Person's following a checklist, but there's a problem, and also not necessarily the person could be that cognizant, maybe even that careful, if he's not a yid who davens. And this is really the message of this chapter. Tzedek lefonav yehalich, because if there's a connection pnimi on a daily basis, the whole Aved of Torah mitzvahs, his learning is different, his davening, his mitzvahs are different, his being careful in sur meira and machshava, even action, speech, even in thought, to be quick, to make sure that millisecond could come clean in the end of the day, and Hashem knows what clean means, and I know what the Yid knows what clean means, and Yid knows what 60%, 70%, or 80% means 20%. Let it happen. The Rebbe has in a beautiful Pirush in beautiful expression, wordage, and when he speaks about the machshava, thought, to push it away, he says there that it's he says mishtei yadayim. He He says with both hands to push away a negative thought, because sometimes it comes a negative thought. It's a little bit like this. No, I'm up from a yid, but let it enter a little bit. Because if you allow the thought to enter, and it's a thought which Hashem says you're not allowed to entertain your mind with, a person drops from a Beinani to Rosh. I use the term because it's Rosh Hashanah Alter Rebbe. Amich Tzadikim, of course, we're all, every year is so holy and special, we're all Tzadikim, but in the terms of Avodas Hashem, it's nuanced, very nuanced. Davening is a game changer even for the Yid to be a Yid the way the Eibishter wants him to be, the Yid, the one who learns Torah the way Hashem wants him to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and not necessarily he's becoming this tzaddik or tzaddik boliyir type of individual. No, it's the regular guy. He doesn't have to be even in someone who sits in yeshiva or kollel the whole day. Of course, if he has to guard carefully his shiuri Torah, that's part of the mandate of the Yid, and he has to go to his mentor. How many hours of the day am I meant to learn Torah? And he's careful in those times to learn Torah. And he connects to the Nesein HaTorah when he learns Torah, even though in the end of the day it's the Pshat and the Rashi and the Tesis and the Rosh. In the Rashba, the Rishonim and Achronim, you have to understand what it is, but it's the sensation of Limud HaTorah, knowing that this is the Anechi Hashem Alikecha, also the distinct way of learning of someone who learns Chassidus and Davins. His type of learning Torah is distinct completely than someone who does not. Torah could also be to the far left. Sam Hamavas, the Gemara says, if someone could take the Holy Torah and bring it into Sak de Klipa, like Alter Rebbe explains in the end of the 40th chapter in Likutei Amorim as an example. Other places again is Tshuva and so on. Namely, the end of the 40th, the end of the 39th or 40th chapter of Likutei Amorim. So even for a moment, the person is able to, so to say, touch the divine, intimately connect with the divine. That's a game changer. That's a Mashiach experience. And that's why it's so important, Alter Rebbe's doctrine in Yom Yom, not to miss a day. So again, it doesn't mean someone who's sitting in kollel. It means a regular, a Yid. He's not necessarily, nor in his schedule, nor in his function, nor in his stature. He's not necessarily the tzaddik or the rush of this, of that. A regular Yid, if he davens, his Torah mitzvahs are qualitative. It's a different type of a connection throughout the entire day, despite the Alter Rebbe says that after davening, you're not going to experience that sensation. Then another new battle begins. But it's a battle with good results, and a battle with genuine results, and a meaningful life of Torah mitzvahs, imbued with purpose, imbued with connection. And of course, one is able to see the other party, another Yid, to expand, to extend oneself. It's a whole different type of Avodas Hashem when one davens, because he had the Mashiach experience in the time of davening. And this is what Alter Rebbe says, so too every nitzos prati me'ashchina shebenefesh kol echad Yisrael. This godly, the detailed spark of the Shechina, the divine presence, which exists in the soul of every single Yetzeis me'agolos v'ashivya, is able to emerge from Golus, exile, from captivity, lefisha, at least part-time. In other words, vis-a-vis the entire, complete immersion, in other words, emerging, leaving Golus and Shivya of the entire nation, and forever, not in a particular time. That's the real Yemaisa Mashiach, the entire full-fledged Yemaisa Mashiach experience. But here we're talking about the Fisha for the part-time, individually, the Chayesha Zutfila, in the Chayesha, which we know Tefillah is called Chayesha for a number of reasons. This is called Chayelim, it's called Chayesha because it deals with Shah, realities associated with time and space. Baruch Aleinu, bless my year, and give me this, give me that. In other words, there's reasons why Tefillah is called Chayesha, not to go into it now. Avodah Shebelev, and which is again prayer, Avodah Shebelev, the Avodah of the heart, from the depth of one heart. This what we spoke about before, the Avodah Pnimis Halev, could be expressed in the time of davening from Nekuda Pnimis, from the inner core of the Yid's So heart and soul, haniglis meha'orla, which becomes revealed from that blockage, completely revealed, not only the milah, but the priya as well, the final layer. And is able to soar on high, to cleave with an intense pining and yearning, to feel the sensation that Hashem is my life. And for that matter, it's also has chadas. This is important as well, because that's what davening is all about. It's not something that sometimes you find a person davening and then he's out of it. At least for the few seconds, he's not there, and at the end of the day, the person himself cannot even trace the dots how he got there. You can see it sometimes. There's a lot spoken about. There's an interesting story, maybe not exactly for now. The idea of Hes Chadas, sometimes you find someone who builds up to, there's a simcha, there's dancing. You see sometimes, you're watching people dancing as an example, and suddenly music goes up, the volume goes down. Like you realize, this is pretty odd, the way they're in that tenua, and there's nothing going on, and you feel it's a bit awkward. You don't know that person would just all of a sudden start making these movements without any reason. And of course, it's not a real question because you just know the volume went down. But it's just to give a little bit of a taste of the idea. What causes the person to do all those movements and dance, as an example, and overjoy, is because there's something happening. There's something causing him to rejoice, and if sometimes he's parties and he's connecting to a joyful experience and a joyful happening, if you will, a simcha, a chassan as an example. So there's a lot of joy, there's actual music, and the person goes into a, so to say, this lively trance, and he's not something which he could even identify the build up to it, and to say, I made this movement and that movement. No, you're in a different world, because it is a experience of true transcendency. And you're acting it out physically, even though you wouldn't do those movements on a regular day when you're more cognizant of your moves and it's more coordinated, planned, focused. But here it's kind of, you're losing yourself into something grander, and it's taking you away to a place that you can't even connect the dots. And that's what Hesach Hadas is really all about. You enter in a place which is beyond Das. Das is something more structured. Chochmah Bina Das. Your movements, your steps, the way you progress and proceed and so on, in everything. And here it's kind of losing yourself into something different. And I mentioned this because sometimes you see, the volume goes off. You see, what are they doing? What's he doing? And you ask yourself, what are you doing if you're watching yourself? If you're bored enough to do that. But just conceptually speaking, the moment the music goes on, it makes perfect sense, because you're losing yourself into a joy which you can't even pinpoint with your hand how you got to that space. But that's the idea. You lose yourself into something grander, which is usually music takes a person into this, so to say, joyous or transcendent experience. But it's not only music, it's the reason why you're celebrating. Again, a wedding would be a classic example. So too when a person comes to this dance and davening, because it's the Meich and Hashem is right there, pulling open the window and trying to connect to you, this together with you. You have to make that effort. Davening, there has to be a chana to tefillah, it's a mishneh, or like Dr. Rebbe writes, and you get us hatshuva, it's worthwhile to see, Perik Yud, the 10th chapter, and you get us hatshuva, how it's also, today it's more metech simcha. We make the right preparation, we step up to the plate. But in the same simultaneous to us stepping up to the plate of davening and making our effort, Hashem pulls open a window, and then we connect, and we're in a certain space which is Hesach Hadas, Lemaila, higher than any structured das that I could reach with my structured focus, because Hashem is there in the other end connecting with me. So pretty much you lose it. You lose yourself into the intimate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course that's Hesach Hadas. Because Mibchina Zu, So that Hesach Hadas is an expression which applies to when a person really exercises a good, healthy davening, to the Hesach Hadas, which we know, again, a terminology used to Yimaisa Mashiach, because it's also the Ma'alim Midas Adam, higher than your structured knowledge. And you're meditating in the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, as explained in the first or second class. Click away. Here the Alter writes it clearly. It's a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, min hashamayim, from heaven, from Hashem extending His supreme face, inwardness, to you at the time that you daven, like it says, that Hashem will shine, He'll demonstrate, He'll share His shiny countenance with you. Also, Panim has the Lashon of Pnimius, as we just mentioned, His inwardness, His shiny inwardness to you. Thus, prayer is that microcosmic Mashiach experience, when a person is able to express, that is, his Pnimius Alev, his inward dimension of his heart, from the depth of his heart, again, that inherent and innate connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like it says, Hashem will circumcise your God. I thought that I would bring in this passage. And we'll stop over here with the text now. The Alter saying, like it says, Hashem gave the Torah to Am Yisrael. There was millions of Yidden, again the 600,000 plus. the different ages which were not part of the 600,000 women as well, and there was millions of people standing there. When Hashem said, Hashem Alekecha, shouldn't have been Hashem Alekechem. He's talking to Am Yisrael, but Hashem is really telling you, Hashem Alekecha. I'm your God, you Yidalo, wherever you are on the map at any single time in this time since Matan Torah, I am connecting to you. I am giving you the Torah. Besides the fact that every day a person has to understand that Hashem is re-giving him the Torah. That's why it says Noisei not Torah. It's not Nosan, not Hashem gave us the Torah in the past, but Noisei presently He's giving us the Torah. We have to feel that Hashem Alekecha, but even when Hashem gave the Torah itself says that I'm giving it to every single Yid, those who are here physically at that time, whoever is not here, which means Hashem is talking to every neshama throughout all generations. To the end of times, I am here, I'm giving you as an individual the Torah. Again, a number of other reasons why it says Hashem said it in a singular manner, but this is primarily, Hashem says, I'm talking to you. I'm giving you the Torah. There's no one else in the world. Me and you, and I'm giving you the Holy Torah. Which, of course, to us, it's a different type of appreciation of the Torah that we learn, our connection to Torah. We're connecting to Anechi Hashem, and Hashem says, Elikecha. I'm giving you part of me. I know Nafshik Sabis Yahabis, the famous Gemara of the acronym of Anoichi. I'm taking my core and giving it to you, extending it to you, and you learn Torah. So that is put by extension, or similarly, rather, he says over here, why did Hashem say in a singular manner? Especially when we're talking about Yimaisa Mashiach, when Hashem is going to do this, this is going to be manifest in the entire world. Of course, starting from the entire Am Yisrael. By extension, the entire world will be elevated, sublimated, and connected to the divine purpose and to the divine message. But nonetheless, Hashem is saying that even before we get to that complete expression of the Mal Hashem Alekecha, you should know Mal Hashem Alekecha individually. Learn Chassidus, daven. You will be able to experience a microcosmic Mashiach experience, which is and will be a game changer, not for years down the road, but that very day, as the Alter Rebbe is going to say later, Tzaddik Yechol V'Yahalich, when your Melech has Pnimis Alev, L'Yosem Ashrav Derech Pa'omav, it's a different type of experience in your Torah mitzvahs, your appreciation, your joy, your soldiering forward with optimism and positivism and inner contentment and elation in your serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu.